Good day, Earthlings. Hope you're doing well. As I mentioned in one of the first videos that I started, I was sentenced to 4 years for animal rights reasons in the late 1980s, and someone suggested that I could maybe tell a couple of stories about that to the extent that they're interesting. So I thought I'd do one of those just to see how it goes and see what you think and all that. First, probably talk about the charge and the trial. Probably the trial was at Sheffield Crown Court. The interesting thing about the trial is that they brought out of retirement someone called Sir Frederick Lawton to be the judge, and he used to arrive every day in his bulletproof car. Now, Sir Frederick Lawton was a law lord, so one of the top judges, in other words, and he came out of retirement on purpose in order to do this trial. And in the 1930s, Sir Frederick Lawton stood for Parliament for the British Union of Fascists. So it's nice to have that kind of person making moral and legal judgments about you, isn't it? I was charged with 3 counts. The first was conspiracy to cause arson. The second was conspiracy to cause criminal damage. And then the third was conspiracy to incite others to cause criminal damage. I was acquitted on the first and convicted of the second 2. Okay, so for those not that familiar with this particular trial, it was the kind of first of the real big ALF show trials, really, and essentially they wanted to silence the organisation, and so it was the press office. And I was the Northern Press Officer at the time. Ronnie Lee was the National Press Officer, and it was the press office that they really wanted to clamp down on and silence us effectively. So Ronnie Lee got 10 years, and I got 4, and a couple of other so-called lieutenants or lieutenants also got 4 years. So I actually went on the run myself because I'd been given bail, but I was the only defendant with children at the time, and we had a meeting with our barristers, which I think Ronnie talks about in his book, The Animal Freedom Fighter. And I remember that they suggested that Ronnie would be getting 15 or 16 years and that I would be getting about 10 years. And so I thought, well, that's all the school time of my children, so I thought, not doing that. So I arranged to disappear, which I did successfully. And in fact, I was working on an organic farm, and I got called in by the owners to hear my sentence, which was quite interesting. And they said, you know, the sentence is on the news, come and see what you got. And so I went trotting in, and so it was 4 years and not 10. And so that immediately begged the question, you know, do you kind of give yourself in because it's relatively short compared with the 10? I didn't actually do that. I stayed on the run for another couple of years, and during that time I had something to do with the foundation of the Federation of Local Animal Rights Groups, and also I started a couple of kind of local groups in places like Wales. And interesting because, like, the reason I got caught in the end is that the press coverage got more and more weird and over the top. For example, there was claims that I had some kind of connections with the IRA, which wasn't true. Also that I was going around Europe stirring up trouble with anarchist groups, which also wasn't true, and such like. And so eventually the kind of pressure got a bit too much. And also there was an alleged bombing in Bristol, which even the police don't think was an animal activist thing, because we moved allegedly from incendiary devices to Semtex explosives, and even the police didn't believe that. So this trial was based on incendiary devices, which of course the press always called bombs, you know, kind of fire bombs, you know, this kind of stuff, which is not true. There's no explosive involved. In fact, the combustible part of these devices, which fitted into a cigarette packet, was 2 fire lighters. and then there was a particular way of igniting these two firelighters. In fact, really, in terms of the conduct of the trial, that really was the only mistake that Lawton made, because he didn't know what firelighters were, and so he had to be told what firelighters were, and that kind of raised a few eyebrows, I suppose, for the somewhat working class jury that we had in Sheffield. So yeah, you see, the thing is, what it was an anti-fur campaign at the time, and you would place one of these things underneath a piece of furniture, and rather than being a firebomb, the actual idea was to create smoke. And when there was sufficient smoke, then the store sprinklers would go off. And so in actual fact, this campaign was based on water damage, not fire damage at all, even though it was you know, a small fire to create the smoke which was started with. There was one exception where an entire department store burnt down in Plymouth. I think it's called Dingles, I think. And I've always argued that we're in an ironic situation there, that the airlift probably saved human lives because of that, because the reason that the thing burnt down was because the sprinkler system wasn't working. And so if there had been a fire in the middle of the day and hundreds of people had been in this multi-story building, then the chances are that not all of them would have got out. So so that's kind of like an interesting one. Okay, so that's that, like the kind of the trial bit and the charges, and as I said, I got 4 years, and eventually I found myself at Wymot, which is a semi-open prison, and so let's think of a couple of things that happened there. There's one which is very relevant to the animal movement, but first of all, I'll talk to you about the kind of like power relations that went on the wings. What used to happen is that one part of the prison was an induction part, and so you would come in there and you would stay there for a week, and then you get allocated onto a wing. And so what they would do there is they would split people up, especially the ones that, as it were, work together on the outside, but also some of the ones who are trying to get at some of the people because of grassing and all the rest of it that was going on. In fact, there was a time when I was in a particular cell, and suddenly there was a lot of kind of barricading going on because there was people outside with knives trying to get in, and the people inside with knives trying to stop the people getting in. And this was because some people who thought they'd been grassed had come from another wing in order to sort the grasser out. So there's a bit of that going on. And so what used to happen is I used to go through education, and I would come back before the people doing the work, which is called labour, came back. So I would be sat in my cell, and all the new people would come on, and it was a little bit like kind of re-establishing the pecking order every Friday. And so all these people would come on, and some of them were kind of, you know, walking on a little bit like Clint Eastwood and stuff. And so there's a little bit of like pecking order sorting out. And they used to call me Mr. Vegan in the prison. And what used to happen is that you know, people would come in and they would say to people they knew, you know, who's that? And said, you know, that's Mr. Vegan, leave him alone, he's all right, you know. And so if you had somebody to vouch for you, that was a good thing. And so all these new people would come on and kind of ask me for a smoke, and I said I don't have any you know, tobacco, which I didn't. Well, I did to sell, but not for smoking. And then half an hour later they would come back and go, you know, just enough for one, mate, kind of thing. I go, look, sorry, I still don't smoke, you know. So there was one scenario. Now I was in somebody else's cell. Sometimes some of the people would call me in to finish off their crosswords for them because they were getting a bit stuck with the Sun crossword, as it were, and so I would help them out, and they really appreciated that. And I was in the one guy's cell, and he was sat there, and there was a pile of tobacco on his desk, and so he was sat behind his desk. There was a pile of tobacco on the desk. I was sat to the side on the bed, and then the door, and then this guy comes in, and he said, "Can I have some snout, mate? You know, we're completely out of it, just on the wing." And this guy goes, "I don't have any." And so the new chap looks down at the pile of tobacco and back up again and said, "You know, just enough for one, mate. You know, please, kind of thing. And the guy goes, I just told you I don't have any. And so the guy looked down again at the pile, and it was one of those, you know, it ended up being a little bit like a film, you know, there's a bit of a standoff going on, and I was thinking, geez, it's going to kick off, you know. And so it grew and grew and grew with the tension, and then eventually the new guy backed off. And that's how the pecking order was kind of sorted out. You know, a lot of new people already, but the ones who didn't, they had to kind of like have a few kind of face-offs really in some kind of ritualistic way and sort themselves out, you know. And that happened every Friday. It was bizarre. There was interesting drug culture in the prison. The screws used to advise the cons on whether a particular block of cannabis was worth half an ounce of tobacco. That was interesting. But the final thing I'll mention this time is relevant to the animal thing, the animal movement, the vegan issue, animal thing. What's that? And that was the fact that I was in the cell once with this guy. And this guy, for years, because he'd been one of these kind of recidivists who'd been in and out of prisons. I think most of his life he'd been in prison just for like trivial things, you know, over and over again, in and out, you know, one of those kind of things. And he always had porridge made with water, with a bit of sugar or sometimes salt on it. He used to have dry toast with either baked beans or peeled plum tomatoes on. And this guy was giving out, as we say in Ireland, you know, kind of like having a bit of a go, veganism. And, you know, kind of obviously finding out that I'm Mr. Vegan and all this. And I said to the guy, you know, I don't know what you're complaining about. You've just had a vegan breakfast. And this chap started to kind of almost retch and be sick, you know, puke. And I thought, this is bizarre. You know, bizarre behaviour. You know, this guy had that breakfast, the same one, for literally years, and now he was told it's a vegan meal, and he's all upset about it. You know, this is really, you know, from a sociological point of view, the real kind of strength of culture. You know, that you can really socially construct things to mean something, and they're very powerful, even if it goes against all your experience, like he did with this guy. You know, goes against all his experience. He'd been quite happy with his breakfast for years and years and years, and then suddenly he starts to puke because it's a vegan breakfast, you know. Absolutely weird. Anyway, so I don't know. Let me know in the comments maybe below whether you find these interesting. I'm not quite sure whether I do, but then I know these stories already, don't I? So there's a few more kind of activist things that I could talk about in other ones, you know, like my trip to the Orkneys with Sea Shepherd, that kind of stuff. That was interesting. We arrived in Glasgow and got told, well, the plan is, lads, we're gonna just keep knocking the gun up into the air so he can't shoot it at the seals. And we thought, that's interesting, because in Scotland, the Orkneys, that's what I'm talking about, they used to shoot the seals, not club them like they did in Canada. So that might be a story that might be interesting. Let me know in the comments below, as they say in these YouTubey things. So there we go, Earthlings. Bye for now.